cried too much. You asked too many questions. You felt everything too strongly. You made adults uncomfortable just by existing at full volume. And somewhere along the way, the family quietly made a decision. They decided you were the problem, the dramatic one, the sensitive one, the one who ruined the picture. That label became your entire identity. It followed you into adulthood like a shadow you couldn't shake. But what if the label was a lie? Not a small lie, a foundational one. A lie that rewrote your relationship with yourself for decades. Here is what Virginia Satir discovered, one of the most important family therapists in history. After thousands of family sessions, she found a pattern nobody wanted to talk about. The difficult child is almost never the problem. They are the most sensitive person in the system, the one feeling everything the family refuses to name. Not the broken one, the alarm. And here is why this matters more than typical childhood advice. Most videos tell you to heal your inner child, but they skip the most important step. You cannot heal a child you still believe was defective. You have to first see what that child actually was. An accurate instrument in an inaccurate room. Picture this scene. You are 7 years old at a family dinner. Everyone is smiling, plates clink, conversation flows, but you feel something underneath the smiles. A coldness between your parents, an anger pressed flat under polite words. Your stomach tightens like a fist. Suddenly you can't eat. You start crying. You don't even know why. And the table turns to you with the same exhausted look. There she goes again. He's being dramatic. Why does he always ruin dinner? But you didn't ruin dinner. You read it correctly. You were the only one in the room not pretending. Let's get into the actual science of what was happening inside you. Start with Jay Belsky and differential susceptibility theory. Belsky discovered that children are not born equally responsive to their environment. Some kids are dandelions. They grow anywhere. Concrete cracks, bad soil, neglect. They still bloom. Other kids are orchids. They are deeply responsive to everything around them. Put them in a healthy environment, and they outperform every dandelion. Put them in a toxic one, and they collapse. Same seed, wildly different outcomes. And here is the part nobody told your parents. The difficult label appears almost exclusively in orchid children, almost never in dandelions, which means the word difficult was never describing you. It was describing the gap between your sensitivity and your environment. It was diagnostic of the soil, not the seed. Now let's go deeper. Back to Virginia Satir. She coined a term that explains your entire childhood. The identified patient. Here is how it works. Every dysfunctional family has invisible problems. An unhappy marriage, an addicted parent, a grief no one speaks about, a resentment that hums under every conversation. These problems threaten the family's image of itself. So the system does something brilliant and cruel. It unconsciously elects one member to carry the symptom. One child becomes the problem. And suddenly the family has something safer to focus on. If only this kid would calm down, we'd be fine. If only this kid would stop crying, we'd be happy. But the kid is not the dysfunction. The kid is the smoke detector going off. And here is the chilling part Satir documented. The family doesn't put out the fire. They unplug the alarm. They medicate it, punish it, shame it, label it, until the alarm starts to believe it was malfunctioning all along. That alarm was you. Now layer in Elaine Aron's research. She studied something called sensory processing sensitivity. Roughly 20% of children are born with it. 1 in 5. Not rare, just rarely understood. These kids have nervous systems wired for depth, not speed. They notice micro-expressions adults miss. They feel tension in a room before anyone speaks. They detect the lie inside a fine. Imagine running adult-level emotional software inside a child's body with 0 tools to manage the input. That is what your nervous system was doing every single day. And what did adults call it? Too sensitive. Too much, defiant, dramatic, attention-seeking. But that wasn't drama. That was accurate emotional data nobody knew how to read. Now we get to one of the most important studies ever done on temperament. Chess and Thomas, the New York longitudinal study. They tracked children from infancy into adulthood. Decades of data, real lives, real outcomes. What they found should be carved into every parenting book. A difficult temperament at age 3 predicted behavioral problems at age 9. But only under one condition: poor parental fit. When the environment matched the child, The outcome completely reversed. Same temperament, different soil, different child. Read that again. The same difficult kid placed in a responsive environment thrived, while placed in a mismatched one, they spiraled. Which means your trajectory was never written into your genes. It was written into the room you were dropped into. And here is the counterintuitive finding most therapy completely misses. Adults who are called difficult children spend years trying to fix themselves. Years on couches, years on books, years on supplements and self-help. Convinced something inside them is fundamentally broken, never realizing the truth. They were the most reality-attuned person in the family. They weren't the problem. They were the proof that something else wasn't working. And everyone in the family agreed to call them the problem instead, because that was easier, cheaper, less threatening to the adults running the system. Most videos on this topic miss what comes next. They tell you it wasn't your fault and stop there. But that sentence alone doesn't change anything. You need a framework to actually rewire the story. So here it is. The soil versus seed reframe. 5 questions to recontextualize your entire childhood narrative. Do not skim them. Sit with each one. Question 1. Why was I difficult? The honest answer. Your nervous system was responding accurately to a mismatched environment. Your reactions were not malfunctions. They were precise readings of an inaccurate room. Question 2. Why did I react so strongly? Because you had adult-level processing in a child-level body. You could feel the dysfunction perfectly. You just had no tools to contain what you were feeling. Imagine pouring a tidal wave through a paper cup. Of course, it spilled everywhere. That was not weakness. That was capacity outpacing equipment. Question 3. Why me and not my siblings? Because you were the orchid in a dandelion family. The most environmentally responsive nervous system in the house. Your siblings adapted by not feeling it. You couldn't, so you felt it for everyone. That is why you remember things they swear never happened. You weren't imagining it. You were the one with the highest resolution memory in the room. Question 4. Why did my family call me the problem? Because you were the alarm. And alarms are inconvenient when nobody wants to leave the burning building. It was cheaper to label you than to confront the fire. So they unplugged you. With shame, with punishment, with laughter at your expense, with the words you still hear in your head as an adult. Stop being so sensitive. You're overreacting. Nobody else has a problem with this, just you. Question 5. What now? Now you understand the only sentence that matters. The seed was never defective. The soil was wrong. Let that sink past your defenses, past the decades of self-blame, past the therapy bills, past every relationship where you apologized for being too much. The seed was never defective. The soil was wrong. And here is what changes the moment you accept that. You stop trying to fix a working instrument. You stop apologizing for noticing what others refuse to see. You stop dimming the sensitivity that was always your sharpest gift. You begin to see your childhood self with new eyes, not as the difficult one, but as the witness, the truth teller, the one small body holding the weight of an entire family's denial. You weren't the problem. You were the proof. And every difficult reaction you had was accurate data. Data that everyone around you refused to read. But here is what nobody warns you about. When the orchid child grows up in the wrong soil, they don't shut down. That would be too obvious. Instead, they adapt. They learn to run faster than their feelings. They learn to think harder than their pain. They learn to push through everything that might slow them down. They become the high achiever who never stops. The one always one task ahead. Always exhausted, but unable to explain why. Because from the outside, they look completely fine. From the inside, every cell is begging for rest they refuse to take. If that exhaustion sounds familiar, you need to see what's actually causing it. Because it isn't laziness. To find out what your tired body has been trying to tell you for years, click the video on your screen right now.